This video investigates the changing face of the Rhondda Valleys, or Cwm Rhondda as it was known. This information was accessed during a private tour of an underground site out to Harvard with an ex-miner. During the 1850s, there was a rapid development in the coal mining industry in the Rhondda Valley. The valley is made up of two conjoining valleys, the larger Rhondda Valley and the smaller Rhondda Valley, and consisted of 16 mining communities and 60 working mines. With a sharp increase of coal mines, the Rhondda population also dramatically increased, from less than 1,000 people to 160,000 people from 1841 to the 19th century. The exploration of the Rhondda was undertaken by the Bute trustees, agents of the 3rd Marquess of Bute, who not only owned large tracts of the valley farmland, but also owned the docks in Cardiff to gain extra revenue from output. Lewis Merthyr was one of the biggest collieries in the country and owned Mardy Pit, which earned him a gross profit of 20 million in his lifetime. With growing success and continuous growth of the mines, the southern coalfield of Wales is the largest continuous coalfield in Britain, extending some 113 kilometres from Pontypool in the east to St Bride's Bay in the west. Covering almost 2,600 kilometres squares, this coalfield took in the majority of Glamorgan, and the entirety of the Rhondda lay deep within it. After the First World War, the economic prospects for Wales were good. Although production fell after the 1913 high, demand was still strong enough to push the coalfields to their limit. In February 1917, coal mining came under government control. After the war, mining industry suffered greatly, with the long-term unemployment figures in 1932 for the Rhondda recorded at 63%. And in Ferndale, the employment figure for adult males rose as high as 72.85%. Between 1924 and 1939, 50,000 people left the Rhondda. However, the coal mining industry of the Rhondda was artificially buoyed throughout the war years. There was a sense of salvation when the government announced the nationalisation of British coal mines in 1947. But the following decades saw a continual reduction in the output from the Rhondda mines. From 15,000 miners in 1947, Rhondda had just a single pit within the valleys, producing coal in 1984. Located at Mardy. However, this also closed at the end of the late 20th century, with the last mine being sunk on the 22nd of December 1990. How did you find the underground experience?
I found it very informative and a useful insight into the history of the Rhondda.
I found the experience very interesting, as it put us through a similar experience that the miners would have encountered.
Taking into account our recent tour, can you see any evident signs of the past in our valley today?
Coming from Cardiff, I hadn't realised that the valley would be so dominated by trees and green space, as Cardiff is so industrialised, flat and built up. And it seems to me that the Rhondda Valley is now a shell of the booming industry that it once was.
Although I must disagree, as from my own personal observations, I was made aware of some subtle signs of the old industry, such as coal tips and abandoned mines, therefore demonstrating that there are still some preserved evidence of the history of the old valleys.
Since the decline in the traditional valley industry, Welsh governments have had to implement strategies and incentives to better the economic situation of the area. They have also encouraged some of the old mines to be turned into museums and heritage centres in order to educate the people about the history of the area. For example, in July 1989, the visitor centre opened to the public once the stores of the Lewis Merthyr colliery. Despite government efforts, the Rhondda has still not fully recovered from the downturn of the heavy and industrial industry in the area. Therefore, unfortunately, many families still live within the economic effects of a major industrial decline. A poem by Dennis Scott. From Mardy in the west to Blaen Rhondda in the east and down to Porth, gateway of the Rhondda, that's all that could be seen was a sea of green. But that was so long ago in a place called Rhondda. Death came to the valley floor, and the trees were no more, as coal pits took their place and men and boys attacked the face. in the never-ending race to line the pockets of the Rhondda not so poor, in a place called Rhondda not many years ago. Every mile up the valley floor, from Porth to Blaen and Margie too, a shaft was sunk to search for a seam in a place called Rhondda many years ago. The valleys are green again in a place called Rhondda, but not by much. You wonder how long it could last before the valleys would be green no more in a place called Rhondda not many years to go.